Looks like field now starting to bunch back up. I do believe we're going to get the signal from the flag stand. Looks like the 1 to go signal being given from the flag stand. So everybody going to line up in their double file formation. Pace car now moving back into the infield. 74 laps to go to settle it, Tim. And I'm telling you, I'm thinking it's about to get intense.
It is. We only had 2 cautions that first 76 lap stint. The intensity is about to pick up. Business is about to pick up, Charlie.
Field now starting to line up double file down the back straightaway again. Chris Wimmer and Jacob Gady up on the front row. Pace now starting to quicken through turns 3 and 4. Green flag about to wave from the flag stand, and we are back underway for 74 laps to wind down the 7-up 150.
Chris Wimmer's able to clear Jacob Gady. Here comes Dan Fredrickson trying to clear Jonathan Island, but he gets to the back end of the 8 car of Gady.
Wow, Nathan Haslai slipped up coming off of turn number 2. He's going to drop back outside of the top 5 as he bunched up the cars behind him. Wow, tough break for Nate Haslai off of turn number 2.
As we're talking about, Dan Fredrickson still on the outside of Jonathan Island. Oh, he gets sideways off turn 2. He's going to lose 1 spot. So only back to the 5th spot, Charlie.
Lost 1 position, but a lot of track position as he's dropped about 10 car lengths away from Jonathan Island in that 3rd spot. Fredrickson been one of the only guys to use that outside groove, but it bit him that time around as he got a little sideways out of turn number 2. Skylar Holtzhausen still working that outside groove through turns 3 and 4, trying to take over the 4th spot, free and clear from Dan Fredrickson.
Fredrickson regrouped now. He's caught himself back together. He's able to get past the 78 of Skylar Holtzhausen, move him back up to the 4th spot, but here comes Skylar Holtzhausen. He says, not so fast.
Holtzhausen doing a great job trying to hold on to Dan Fredrickson, but nothing doing. Fredrickson going to clear Skylar Holtzhausen and take over that 4th spot, free and clear, down into turn number 1. Now, the next side-by-side battle on the racetrack is going to be Johnny Van Dorn, who's diving to the inside of Eddie Hoffman through turns 3 and 4.
Van Dorn side-by-side with Hoffman. That's the 3rd car he has passed in the last 2 laps, Charlie. The 61 starting to show his hand here and reel in that top 5.
Little bit of trouble through turns 3 and 4 that time around as Derek Griffin got punted from behind. Derek doing a great job to hold on to that car, but he did lose a lot of track position as we again see some of the cars at the tail end of the field knocking fenders and slipping and sliding through turns 3 and 4.
Johnny Van Dorn all over the 87 and Nathan Haslai. He pushed him through turn 2. He is side by side up to the door with the 87 and Nathan Haslai. Moved Johnny Van Dorn up a spot.
We talked about it with Matt Preer just a few moments ago. They said lap 100. I'm thinking it was lap 76 is when they gave Johnny Van Dorn the green light to go, because Van Dorn is on a tear here as we have now completed lap 84. Van Dorn already picked up 5 spots, and he is all over the back end of Skylar Holtzhausen as we have a caution on the racetrack. Looks like Chad Finlay getting turned sideways coming out of turn number 2. So that's going to put us under the caution flag for the 3rd time here tonight in the 7-up 150.
I was watching Chad Finlay a few laps before that caution, and he got punted up out of the way by
again, Chris Wimmer up at the front, Jacob Gady. I think Jacob has either been 1st or 2nd every single lap to this point. He's done a great job, although he started on the front row due to the inversion. He has certainly held on to one of the top 2 spots here all afternoon. Jonathan Island and Dan Fredrickson. Let's see what happens on this restart, because when we went back green after the halfway break, it looked like Jacob Gady maybe got a little sideways coming off of turn number 2 up in that outside groove, and that really stunted Dan Fredrickson's charge. Let's see what happens here on the restart.
Chris Wimmer hard on the throttle. Green flag back out here as they hit off the turn 1. Great restart for Chris Wimmer, but here comes Jacob Gady on the outside.
Jacob not able to hold on as Chris Wimmer spurts back out into the lead, but here comes Dan Fredrickson taking over that 3rd spot in the outside groove through turns 3 and 4. Now Fredrickson trying to make some room to the outside of Jacob Gady. Gady slams the door down the main straightaway as we have trouble down into turns 1 and 2.
Trouble down in turn 2, Charlie. Looks like the 6 of Brandon Hermeiler. And
also looks like the number 4 car of Thor. Actually, that's not the number 4 car of Thor Anderson. Thor now making hit. I'm wrong. That is Thor Anderson over there in turns 1 and 2. Looks like he and the number 84 car of Jay Newick also getting tied up with Brandon Hermiller heading down into turn number 1. Thankfully, they didn't make contact with that inside pit wall down there, but it does look like some pretty significant damage to the nose of the number 84 car of Jake. Big thing on this restart, Dan Fredrickson now on the inside groove. Let's see if he is able to make that lower groove work like he has been able to use the outside groove to his advantage. Johnny Van Dorn lining up outside him. Jonathan Elin, Skylar Holtzhausen rounding out the top 6 as the green flag waves as Jacob Gady side by side with Chris Wimmer through turns 1 and 2.
Johnny Van Dorn looking for that 3rd spot on Dan Fredrickson. Move Johnny Van Dorn up to that 3rd spot now after restarting 10th.
As he gets a little shove from Dan Fredrickson. Fredrickson not wanting to let go of that 3rd spot, but still side by side for the lead as Jacob Gady still hanging on to that outside groove with Chris Wimmer down the back straightaway.
Wimmer's able to finally clear Jacob Gady. Can he rebound? But here comes Johnny Van Dorn now in the process. All over the back end of Jacob Gady is ahead by right down the front straightaway.
Some great side-by-side racing throughout the top 10 as now Nate Hasline looking to the inside of Skylar Holtzhausen. Bubba Pollard also looking to the outside of Holtzhausen down the back straightaway and through turns 3 and 4. But now Johnny Van Dorn all over the back bumper of Jacob Gady through turns 1 and 2.
Van Dorn is committed to that bottom line, but he's also been able to use that high line when he needs to. He's all over the rear end of the 8 of Jacob Gady in turn 3. Can he get that 2nd position away?
Van Dorn again a half a groove lower than Jacob Gady. Van Dorn diving to the inside through turns 1 and 2. Down onto the rumble strips. He was so low through turns 1 and 2. Gady able to slam the door shut, still holding on to that 2nd spot through turns 3 and 4.
Nobody giving an inch here. Lap 89 complete. Van Dorn all over the rear end again, side by side for 2nd. Johnny Van Dorn now up to 2nd. Here comes Gady trying to fight back on the outside. So the 8 is moving backwards, going the wrong way here with just 36 laps to go.
And again, Jacob Gady using one of the 2-barrel carburetor engines. We really thought those were going to be the guys that were going to have a little bit extra juice left in the tires as a result of a little bit less weight and a little bit less horsepower, not abusing the tires so much. So kind of a surprise that we're seeing Jacob Gady go the other way. But of course, Jacob really ran hard trying to stay up at the front of the field. And it actually may have worked out just the opposite, where he actually had to work harder than he wanted to stay up near the front of the field. Again, lap 117 now in the books as Johnny Van Dorn all over the back bumper of Chris Wimmer off into turns 3 and 4.
They made a little bit of contact in turn 2. Johnny Van Dorn saying it's time to go. Let's get past these lap cars and settle it amongst ourselves as they're able to get past the 26.
That's the Rick Turner automobile. Next car to go a lap down, that's going to be Brandon Hermiller. We saw Brandon get tied up in that accident going down into turn number 1 back about 30 laps ago, lap 85 to be exact.
Hoffman has to get on the brakes there and check up a little bit.
Really had to whoa up, had a lot of momentum rolling through turns 1 and 2 that time by, but that really forced him to get up off the gas. And again, Jacob Gady not willing to concede that spot at all. Doing a great job working that outside groove, and it looks like Jacob Gady actually getting a little bit of an advantage off of turn number 2 that time around. As we see trouble over in turns 3 and 4, looks like the 89 car, Matt Tuft, looks like he had something go wrong underneath the hood of that machine, sliding up and making some contact with the outside wall between turn 3 and 4, and that will bring out the caution flag for the 5th time here this evening.
No contact there with another car. Looked like obviously something had to break in that race car or a flat tire. Can't really tell from this angle, but the youngster, the 16-year-old, was running very well in his first trip to Toledo Speedway, just outside of the top 10 and creeping up on that battle 6 through 10. Tough break.
I looked over into turn number 3 and saw some smoke coming from underneath that number 89 car. Don't know if that was because he had already gotten loose or whether or not something came loose underneath the hood of that machine, but it does look like Matt able to get that thing turned around and pointed back in the right direction.
Going to be 26 laps to go here when we get the green flag. A Saturday night short track shootout here coming your way at Toledo Speedway. Chris Wimmer hard on the gas out of turn 4. He gets a great restart as he clears Johnny Van Dorn. Here comes Bubba Pollard going for 2nd.
Pollard sticks it down inside of Johnny Van Dorn, but can't make it stick. Van Dorn able to hold on to that 2nd spot, but he does have to fall in line behind Chris Wimmer, who holds on to the lead as we come across to complete lap 125. Just 25 laps to go in tonight's 7-Up 150.
Bubba Pollard gets a great run in the middle of turn 2 and close back up to Johnny Van Dorn, but he pulled him off at turn 2. Now Van Dorn all over the rear end of Chris Wimmer in turn 3.
Looks like Jacob Gady up out of the groove through turns 3 and 4. That's going to cost him at least one spot as Eddie Hoffman looking to the inside. That's going to push Jacob Gady back to 7th, if not 8th. But again, here comes Johnny Van Dorn looking to the inside of Chris Wimmer. Gives him a little shove through turns 3 and 4. Give the lead to Johnny Van Dorn off of turn number 4.
And Chris Wimmer rebound and repay the favor here as he's trying to get to the rear end of Johnny Van Dorn. But Van Dorn pulls him off of turn 2 by 2 car lengths.
If you want to repay him, you first have to catch him. Johnny Van Dorn now stretching out that lead on Chris Wimmer. Boy, hard to believe after 127 laps, boom, here comes Johnny Van Dorn on the charge as he now begins to stretch out that advantage over Chris Wimmer in 2nd spot.
Problems for Jacob Gady. He lost about 10 spots there, got up out of the groove the last lap in turn 3 and 4. He's still falling through the field, Charlie.
Another guy who just had some problems down the backstretch. Looks like he may have a tire going down. Mark Krause in the number 9 car, up out of the groove. Definitely something wrong with that number 9 machine as the field scatters to try to make its way around through turns 1 and 2.
While that's going on, Johnny Van Dorn starting to pull away about a 4 or 5 car length lead. Yellow flag out here at lap 129.
Caution going to come out. I believe the ARCA CRA series officials believe there may be some debris out on the racetrack. We did have a couple of cars in a very short period of time experience some, I believe, some tire difficulties. So we're going to put the safety crew out on the racetrack, make a quick look for debris. Now rolling through turns 3 and 4, green flag in the air. Again, Johnny Van Dorn on the brake, but Chris Wimmer hanging tough through that outside groove through turns 1 and 2.
Van Dorn able to clear him. Let's see if Chris Wimmer is able to get to the rear bumper. He's taking a peek to the inside, but Van Dorn gets a great run in turn 3. For the battle 3rd through 5th, but here comes Wimmer now all over the rear end of Johnny Van Dorn.
Wimmer
right down the front straightaway.
All over the back bumper of Johnny Van Dorn coming out of turn 4 that time around. 139 laps in the books. Here comes Wimmer looking to the inside down into turns 3 and 4.
Wimmer gets a nose out in front. Can he clear Johnny Van Dorn side by side? He has the preferred group. Move Chris Wimmer back to the lead at lap 140.
10 laps to go in tonight's 7-up 150. Here comes Johnny Van Dorn back on the inside out of turn number 2. Nothing doing. Chris Wimmer now 2 car lengths ahead down into turn 3 and 4. But again, Van Dorn able to close that gap as they cross the start-finish line to complete lap 141.
9 laps to go. Battle heating up at the front of the field. Johnny Van Dorn now taking a peek again to the inside of Chris Wimmer as they head down to turn 3. Here comes Johnny Van Dorn looking for the lead. He retakes the lead with 9 laps to go.
Slip and slide, dip and dive. Johnny Van Dorn using the inside, using the outside, able to slip back beneath Chris Wimmer to take over that top spot with just 8 laps yet to go. And now Van Dorn stretching out a 3 car length lead on Chris Wimmer into turns 3 and 4.
Wimmer did not get off turn 2 that last time, but a great run off turn 4. He's a half a car length now on the rear end of Johnny Van Dorn. Can he get back to him as they head off to the backstretch?
143 laps in the books. I don't know that these guys have time. We see a side-by-side battle for position directly in front of our leaders.
Wimmer struggled to get around Gady, but 2 lap cars right in front of Johnny Van Dorn. They get single file. Anderson Bowen gonna let Van Dorn take the outside line as he clears them. Let's see if Wimmer can get around the lap car just as well.
Johnny Van Dorn starting to stretch on a 5-car length lead through turns 3 and 4. This time around, we will receive the white flag. 1 lap to go in tonight's 7-up 150. Johnny Van Dorn continuing to stretch out that advantage through turns 1 and 2. Chris Wimmer digging hard down on the inside, nothing doing. Doesn't look like Johnny Van Dorn is going to have to deal with anything. Next thing he sees in the windshield will be the checkered flag. Here comes Johnny Van Dorn to take the win in tonight's 7-up 150. Chris Wimmer crosses the line in second. Looks like we're going to give third to, I believe, Skylar Holtzhausen holding on to that third spot. Fourth going to be Nathan Hasline. It looks like fifth going to go to, if I can check him on the racetrack here, it looks like Eddie Hoffman going to cross. Bubba Pollard, excuse me, in the 26th. Going to finish in 5th with Eddie Hoffman in 6th. But wow, when the pressure was on, I thought Wimmer had him. I thought Wimmer was in the free and clear, but wow, Johnny Van Dorn tightening those belts and pulling himself up on the wheel and able to drive past Chris Wimmer with just 7 laps to go and gonna go to victory lane here tonight in the first ever combination event for the ARCA CRA Super Series and the ARCA Midwest Tour. Johnny Van Dorn, your winner in tonight's 7-up 150.
New track record he set earlier today in qualifying, started in 6th position. Ran the race textbook for the first half, slid back to 10th, saved his tires. After that restart, lap 85, he went from 10th to second in a matter of 10 laps, ends up in victory lane. He gets redemption here from last year's CRA Super
You
Series
called
race.
him. You picked the winner here tonight, Mr. Clag. Good job. Johnny Van Doorn now taking the Alan Kulwicki-inspired Polish victory lap.